Something happened a couple years ago to one of our pastors who started a new mission. Jeremy, a good friend of ours who was our worship pastor, went on sabbatical. It's a scary thing when pastors do that, but they let us do that every 7 years. And he went to the Dream Center in LA, where he's from. And we just watched that seed grow and birth in him to where we eventually kicked him out, launched him out last July. It's been wonderful to see. And we have a new ministry in town thanks to a worship pastor discovering he was actually a missionary. Well, that's had ripple effects throughout our body, and one of those ripples hit you. Tell me how that happened.
It did, and in fact, part of this goes back to my wife as well, who has a very, very much vested stake in this, what we call Raleigh Dream Center. Just to give people a little bit of background about Dream Center itself, it was founded in LA 30 or 40 years ago. There's 100 different sites in the U.S. today, and Raleigh is one of the newer ones. So we're still growing and evolving, much like any new organization does. But I think the one thing it did, and we all visited the LA branch to really get a flavor for what that was about.
Yeah, 20 years on, it's beautiful to see.
And you just see how people serve and give, and that just really soaked in and said, I this is something I can do, take advantage of what I like to do, my gifts and this kind of thing. So that was the start.
Well, Jack, one of the things that some of my collaborators with this training site were preparing this for are concerned about a lot of Christians who were bored. Well, we call them born-again Christians. They're good people. They love the Lord. They're faithful. They've been discipled. They go to Sunday school. They serve. They do things. But honestly, we see many of them leaving the church because, not unlike Crossroads, it has tons of places to serve. There are places where it's like, you do our gig and that's it. There's nothing pushed out in the community. Maybe global is you send stuff over there. And it's kind of like what we need to do is show up and pay up and then shut up. And that's not, it's unfortunately truer than people realize. And after a while, you kind of think, maybe I just watch it, I'll just can it from home. I'll come at Christmas and Easter. Now, I'm not saying you were that kind of a Christian, but have you seen that kind of thing in the church experience you've had, or people who have kind of gotten stuck in that route?
That's definitely a risk, for sure, to be very feel very fulfilled by the basics and this kind of thing. But what really woke me up was the visit to LA Dream Center. And I saw what was going on around the church there. And it's not well known here in Raleigh. I mean, that's the funny thing. People really don't understand the need and the needy people that are out in this community itself.
What happened?
Well, and a little bit of background just to kind of put this in perspective. At part of Raleigh Dream Center, we have two different styles of this approach. One is called Adopt a Block, where we have Saturday morning meetings, and the other is called Food Truck, where we simply bring food. Now the food truck is on a Friday afternoon. It's going to expand in the near future, but you simply bring food, and people know you're coming. It's a routine. They get in the routine, and after 3 or 4 months of this, you start seeing the familiar faces. And you get to learn these people's names, and they learn your name. And when you see them, it's like, hey, friend, how you doing?
They're really a neighbor now. Even if you live 12 miles away, all of a sudden, I'm here every other Friday. I know you, you know me, and I know this is a hungry place. You don't have a car. It's not so easy for you to get food, especially when you have a food deficit.
And there's 5 or 6 of you living in a 1-bedroom home. Those kinds of things that, quite honestly, I did not appreciate as part of the Raleigh community but prior to this. Okay, so
tell me what went on in your heart. I mean, the first time you get exposed to that and you walk in and think, this mom has 4 kids sleeping on the floor with blankets and no mattresses, and there's nothing in the refrigerator. How did you feel as a Christian, as a citizen, as a member of Raleigh? I mean, that's hard to go home and sleep after seeing that the first time.
That is, at the same time, it fed my desires to do more. I mean, that's what really a big part of what lit the fire, just to be an integral part of this and help plan, understand, execute, implement, and it's just been rewarding, both not just for me, but for the people. I mean, that's what this is all about. It's about a relationship, and the relationship starts with a need. That's a lot of times that happens, but then it evolves into much more than just giving food. It's also blessing the people. It's also helping them with spirituality.
Removing obstacles that are no big deal to us, but are like a mountain to them.
And giving them prayer and this kind of thing.
Hope.
And hope. And it's just rewarding to be able to do this. And now this is just one example. And another good example is what we one Adopt a Block that I'm not going to mention by name at this point. But we talk to the parents who come out for the food, and they say, you know what? We can't let our kids come out to the playground because it's too dangerous here. So the one time a week, or one time every other week, when they actually have kids come out is when we're there. And our volunteers bring kids, and we play kickball, we play softball, we play basketball, and the kids are just enriched. And then we have Bible stories for the kids. So it's just so much more than the food is the attraction point, but there's so much more there that comes by.
I can just see the first time you see that hungry family going, Jesus said, if you give a cup of cold water or a piece of bread in my name. I'm sure it's going on in your background going, oh my goodness, this is like 16 blocks from the church. Where have I been? And you're going home going, how can I not do this? What's it like to have poor neighbors that it's not about their poverty anymore? They're just neighbors that you go see on a regular basis. You've adopted them. They've kind of adopted you, and their needs are one of the transactional things, but something more than transaction is out. You're a different person. You've always been a great volunteer. You've done so many things here, but you light up like a Christmas tree when I ask you about Dream Center. Now, that's not always been the case in children and ushering, and I love that you help us with communion and all that stuff. We really do need you to do that, but Dream Center seems to have tapped into something pretty neat in you, and it just blesses me to see that. Could you tell us a little about that?
And I think the difference is you mentioned things like ushering and communion. That's very much serving, but it's kind of a one-way serve. Okay, and the difference is this is two-way because they serve you. I mean, they fulfill a richness in you that just is such great feedback and this kind of thing. And over time, as you develop relationships with these people, it's not just every week showing up and giving out food. I mean, you develop a relationship, and you come to know them by name, they know you by name, and it's like a next door neighbor. I mean, that kind of thing.
Jack, you're an executive guy. I know how smart you are, even though you wouldn't tell people. I know you are. You can do numbers. You can figure things out. You got to be looking at the numbers of this and thinking, my goodness, if we could get, I don't know, some X factor of Christians in this city to adopt all these high-need, high-risk neighborhoods and adopt them and go into them and make them safe for kids to play on the jungle gym outside and to work with the police to try to not just irritate the ne'er-do-wells, but actually help them, try to minister to them. Many of them are doing evil because there's nothing else to do. I mean, I know that sounds morally wrong, but I mean, some of these guys have had such bad luck their whole life. They've been kind of pushed in that direction with no alternative, so that's what they do. It's what they know to do.
Right. And that's very true. And one of the visions of Raleigh Dream Center is to continue to expand because there's more and more opportunity. Today, we're speaking here today, we have one food truck and we have what we call 5 adoptive blocks. And we're about, in the very near future, the next couple of months, we're about to add 6 more food truck locations, neighborhoods. So talk about we need volunteers. So if you're listening to this, feel free to call. If we get a hold of us.
A couple more questions. One is there a particular story or incident that's it's like the poster child of why Jack got involved in this that you'd want to share? If I gave you a chance to tell us.
Well, I think it goes back to this one development where the kids were not allowed to go out. And to be able to mix with them, with the adults, provide, to serve, and at the same time see incredible reward, giving back, and how the parents really appreciated it, and how the kids appreciated it, and when I hear that this can't happen unless we're there. And then I read in the paper the next week about a shooting and this kind of thing. And I'm saying, wow, this is making a difference in a large number of people's lives, and including mine.
Well, Jack, if we happen to have some business people who've come to our church and they've never been to the hood. They don't know where poverty is. They're driving through the nice North Raleigh stuff that you and I live in and know about.
I didn't either prior to this. I admit.
I know it, but what would you want to say to someone like that? Because, the news media likes to scare us to death that, if we all go to the poor town, we're going to get shot and infected or something horrible is going to happen. Right. But that is clearly not the case. What would you want to say to a businessman like Jack Kramer who's living the good life here in Raleigh? But honestly, if he could admit it to a pastor who wouldn't mind, he'd say, I'm kind of a born-again Christian. Is there something else? What is that something else?
This is the vehicle to experience that something else, because there are some risks. I mean, in all honesty, there's some risk in what we do.
You can't be naive.
But you're part of a team. You're in mass. You're together. You have certain guidelines on what you do and what you don't do. All those things, okay. But you're able to go out and quite honestly, I feel no threat whatsoever anymore.
We've been talking to a member here, Jack Creamer, who works in the corporate world and did all the typical good things you'd want a church member to do. And then he got pulled into an outreach community, going into poor communities and becoming neighbors, acknowledging needs, bringing felt needs there, building a relationship that grew beyond just those needs and actually became transformational in his life as well as those neighbors. We're trying to build a city that we all want to live in. And Jack, thanks for stepping up and doing that, and thanks for sharing your story with some other people who might be right where you were before this happened, okay? Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Appreciate that.